Peace everyone, Unmask Art here, and welcome to the final episode of Season 1 of Peaceful Pastels. I hope you've enjoyed this series up till now. Season 2 will be coming in the near future, so stay tuned for that. In today's episode, we are going to be doing a foggy farm landscape. And as usual, we'll be using the colors from the Season 1 starter pack, which you can get using the link in the description. Also, make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss the announcement for Season 2. Anyways, let's get started. Okay, so the first color we are going to be using is the Cool Gray number 1, and we're going to be creating a rather plain sky, but the project will get more complicated as we get into the actual landscape. Since it's a foggy scene, we're just going to use a little bit of the cool gray up at the top to create kind of that overcast, misty sky that we want. Probably add just a touch of blue and a little bit of white, keep things nice and light. Just going to apply this just up at the top. What we're going to have is we're going to have this sky, and then we're going to have some distant trees, kind of like big hills in the back. Alright, so there's that cool gray number 1. Let's add just a little bit of our powder blue. Since it is a sky after all, we want maybe just a hint of blue. Not a lot though, just a tiny bit. And then we'll use some of the white. Just to bring those colors together. Make sure it's nice and light. And we'll go over it one more time with that cool gray. Just bring a little bit more gray into it. That way we have enough pigment on the paper so that when we blend it out, it's all covered. There we go. That should be enough. So I'm just going to grab the little blender here, start up at the top, and just gently blend this sky out. Make sure it's nice and soft. We got the paper covered, got a good color. You can see a little bit, just a tiny bit of that powder blue peeking through the gray, making it more sky-like. There we go. Give it a nice blend. Very easy sky here. Nothing complicated. There's not a lot of the sky that's going to be showing in this project, so no need to spend too much time on it. All right, and there we go. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add in like the hill of trees that is going to be up at the top here, and they're also going to be in the distance, so they're not going to be too dark or anything like that. So let's get started on that. So to get started on those distant trees, we're going to use the cool gray number 6, and we're going to start by just kind of creating little vertical marks where those tree tops are going to be. Now remember, these aren't mountains, so they're not going to be, as extreme. They're just hills with trees on top. So they're not going to have like crazy mountain peaks or anything like that. They'll just have kind of a gradual, more hill-like shape to them. There we go. And now that we have that top portion kind of laid out, we're just going to bring this down a bit. Bring this color down into like the middle of the page or so. Maybe about down to here. About that far. So that's all we need to fill in with this color. I'm going to use a few colors here. The trees aren't going to be this dark. This is a little bit darker than what we want. So what we're going to do is we're going to mix some of the cool gray number 1. We're going to mix a little bit of that olive green in there, so that we can get that green color into the trees a little bit. And then we'll use some white down at the bottom to kind of create a misty fog that's going to be in front of these trees. There we go. Let's just kind of fill in the rest of this area. So that should be enough of the cool gray number 6. Now let's switch over to the cool gray number 1 and apply this right over top of it. And this is just going to be to lighten it so it's not as dark. Feel free to leave some texture in there. These are trees after all. Now they're in the distance, so they're not really in focus as much as the foreground subjects will be, but a little bit of texture won't hurt. So feel free to just kind of scribble these colors on there. We're going to blend them out thoroughly anyway, so there won't be a lot of texture left anyway. There we go. Let's just throw in a touch of the olive just to get some green in there. Just going to add a really small amount of this. I don't want the trees to be too green as they are really far in the distance and they're covered by fog, so they should appear kind of a cooler gray, bluish color, but a little bit of green will do them nicely. All right, and the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to use our white to, we're going to kind of build fog up on the bottom. So we're going to just use our white down at the bottom here. Just big fluffy circles of white, kind of like clouds. There we go. Very, very simple. Now let's grab our blending tool, and I'm going to kind of use the edge to make those tree tops, and I'm going to just kind of pull it down. So I'm going to use the knife to kind of create that nice edge that separates the trees from the sky. And I'm going to use the shape of the sponge here to kind of make those tree tops look nice. And use the side too for skinnier trees. Yeah, that's a little bit better, side of the brush. All the way across, and then once you get the top part done, you can just kind of pull the rest of the colors down. Now that we have that tree line nice and sharp against the sky, we can just kind of blend the rest of the color out and just make it soft. Get rid of the texture, get rid of the lines, all of that stuff. Nice soft texture. And then once you're done with the darker part of the trees, the top part, what we're going to do is we're going to just bring the fog up. So the white and the light gray is going to push that right up into those trees. Might even use a little bit more of the cool gray. So I'm going to use some of the cool gray number 1. Just add a little bit more fog. And then I'll just do little circles, blending that out. Nice fog texture. All right, that looks pretty good. Nice and misty. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add another tree line in front of this, but these trees are going to be a bit darker, they're going to be a bit more detailed, and we'll add some fun colors into them as well. So again, for these trees, we're going to start with the cool gray number 6, and we're going to kind of define our horizon line here. So our horizon line is going to start about here, and it's just going to kind of work its way over here like this. So this is about where the horizon line is going to be, and then everything in front of that will be the grass and all of that. So all of this will be trees. So we're just going to kind of put this color in here and make some tree shapes. Just going to make kind of a small little circular shapes for some of the tree leaf textures and whatnot. Come up maybe real high here and just be real loose with this. There's no precision in doing this, just kind of building up, you know, some of that random tree shape. This is just a bunch of trees all bunched together, you know, a forest if you want to give it a name. So this is kind of the shadow color of our trees here. And then we'll add some nice olive, maybe a little bit of tangerine or some zinc yellow. Give these trees just a little bit of color, separating them from the trees in the background. And these trees, they'll also have some fog in front of them. That's pretty good amount of the cool gray number 6, and add a little bit of olive to our trees now before we blend them out. So I'll just sprinkle in a little bit of olive. That way when we mix all these colors, we get a nice kind of greenish leaf color to our trees. Just kind of scribbling about here as I spread this color around. Nothing too complex, keeping it simple. All right, let's see here. Maybe let's add a little bit of brown. So we got our burnt sienna here. We'll just sprinkle in a little bit of burnt sienna. You know, trees have some brown in there, so might as well. All right, and let's add a little bit of black as well. So let's just grab our black and put in some dark shapes throughout our trees. Not too much black, but it's good for the contrast, kind of makes the trees have some more depth to them. You can kind of think of, as you're applying the black, kind of outlining like single trees. So you can kind of think of the tree being in front and then the black being surrounding it. That will kind of help make those trees feel like they have layers. All right, just a little bit more. There we go. And let's go ahead and blend this out here before we add in any fog or any of the other lighter colors. So let's just kind of kind of tap, make as much tree texture as we can with the blending. The reason I like to tap here instead of just kind of blending in sweeping motions is because when you tap the colors, you still blend them, but you don't spread them as far. So the green, where you apply the green, it kind of stays there. The black, you don't want to spread the black all over the trees. You just want to kind of keep those shadows where they're at. And so you just give them a little bit of a tap to get rid of that grainy texture from the application of the pastel. And by tapping it, you don't spread the colors around all over the place. And you get more of that leaf-like look for the trees. Oh yeah, these are going to look good. I already like the color tone of this landscape. Might end up being my favorite for this season. You guys will have to let me know which episode you enjoyed the most this season and what you hope to see in season 2. Leave your suggestions in the comments. Yeah, my wife helped me choose the landscape for this episode. So you can, if you enjoy this episode, you can thank my wife, my lovely wife, Anna. All right, now I'm just going to really gently kind of brush some of the lower part of the trees out of focus, just a tiny bit, not to spread the color, but just to cover the paper a little bit better. All right, that's a pretty good foundation for the trees. What we're going to do now is we're going to use some of our brighter colors, like the tangerine. I'm going to use some tangerine here and just kind of create light highlights at the top of the trees. I'm just going to kind of tap the top parts of the trees to kind of give it the illusion that the light is hitting it. Now it'll look a little strange at the beginning here, but once I add some of the leaf green and zinc yellow, it will start to make a little bit more sense. Just a little bit over here. Maybe this tree is just barely getting hit by any light. All right, let's use a little bit of our leaf green. Very, very bright leaf green. Probably bring some of this down a little bit lower as well. Just going to do bunch of little dots, and then when we blend it out, we'll kind of make these dots look a little bit more natural. Now remember, this isn't the main focus of this landscape, still have all the foreground to do, so you don't need to get too caught up in the details of these trees. We are going to blend it out, going to make it look a little bit softer and not as detailed. All right, let's add a little bit of the zinc yellow now. Bring in some nice yellow into the trees. There we go. And before we continue on with the blending, let's grab our cool gray number 1 and put in the fog down at the bottom. So I'm just going to kind of do small circles, create that fluffy fog. I'm going to get plenty of this on here. All right, now let's go back to tapping our trees a little bit, kind of get those colors to be a bit more natural, blend in there with those darker grays and olive green. That way they don't show up too much. Make them feel a little bit more natural. Now you can do this several times. You can do it as many times as you want. You can do it with the black as well to get some of those dark shadows to have a bit more texture to them also. And there we go. So just a hint of light on the tops of those trees. And now let's come down here to the fog and just blend this out. Just big circles. Get all those colors moving together. Now if it's blending too dark for you, that's okay. You can always apply more gray to get the right value that you need, because all those dark colors kind of blending into the fog, they're not quite as bright as I'd like. So I'm going to grab some of that cool gray number 1 again and just do a few passes with this. Add a little bit more of that pigment there. Just kind of blend it again. There we go. And I'm going to use some of the cool gray number 6 for the bottoms of the trees here. So some of the trees will still be, showing through. So some of those darker areas in the fog. Just a few little vertical dashed lines there. And then we're just going to kind of sweep them down. And that will be like the tree trunks right at the foot of the trees. All right, now it is time to start putting in the grass. All right, everyone, I hope you've been enjoying today's episode. Before we continue, I want to mention my new art club. The Unmask Art Club is a subscription to my library of tutorials, which includes hundreds of hours of real-time instruction for pastels and colored pencils, with a few miscellaneous tutorials thrown in too. You can also join the live tutorial sessions that happen every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. All of the projects are from club member suggestions, and with every project you get the reference photo and easy traceable line art. You can check out the list of tutorials before signing up. Just click the link in the description. But for now, let's get back to our project here. All right, so for the base layer of the grass, we're going to use some of our olive green. And we're just going to start here at the horizon line. Just going to reinforce where that horizon's at. kind of right there at the base of the trees. I'm just going to bring in some grass real slowly like this with the olive green. Just going to start covering up the paper. This olive green is like the perfect color for the grass in this landscape. It's kind of dark, it's a little muted. It's kind of just perfect. So I'm just going to do a few passes with the olive green here. You can see that there's still plenty of the paper showing through, and that's fine. We kind of want that. All right, now we're going to use some black down at the front here. So this is where things are going to start to get a little bit more contrasted. There's going to be some more detail down here. So we're just going to use a little bit of black right over top of the olive green down here in the front. Now we're going to have a little path coming through here. So we're going to use this to darken the edge of the grass that's leading up that path there. So I'm just going to kind of come from here about a third of the way up the page and just going to gently curve right in there. That path is going to kind of look like this. So you can somewhat see that path there. All right, and now the next primary color. Since all of this scene is really foggy, we're going to have all of that fog kind of up on top of the grass as well. So we're going to use our cool gray number 1 throughout the grass here. And this is going to be the primary color of our grass. It's going to be that olive green and the cool gray number 1. It's going to be nice and foggy. And that path is going to come in with a bit more gray. It's not going to be foggy. It's just going to be kind of gravel. So we'll just kind of make that path show up a little bit. That's kind of the pathway there. A little bit of fog up here. And let's see here, what other color could we maybe bring in here? Just let's use the darker gray, so the cool gray number 6. We'll use this for some value changes in the grass along this path. Kind of scribble in just a bit of random texture into the gravel. We'll do the gravel later, but this will kind of be the gravel of the path. Maybe we can add some of that burnt sienna also into the path. You know, there's some dirt in there, so I'll just scribble in a little bit of burnt sienna. And that is going to be the foundation. So let's go ahead and blend this out, see what we're working with. We might have to add a few more layers of pigment to cover the paper, but we might be pretty good with what we have now. So we're just going to blend all this out. And before we get into the details of the grass, what we're going to do is we're going to add a little barn right here. I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible so you don't have to have, you know, the best drawing skills in the world to do it. Just some really, really simple, basic shapes, and you should be able to manage that. Yeah, see, the paper's still showing through quite a bit, so we'll probably end up utilizing some more layers when we get back to the grass. But after we blend this out, we're going to put the barn in before we move on with the grass. There we go. All right, that's a pretty good foundation for the grass, but before we move on, like I said, we're going to put a barn in right here. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so for the barn, we're going to start with some black, and I just have a little nub of a piece of black here. And we're going to put in 3 vertical lines first. So we're going to have a vertical line right here. So that's going to be the start of the barn. We're going to have one, I don't know, about 2 centimeters or about 1 inch to the left of that. About like that. So I think just about anybody can do lines like that. And now we're going to have a 3rd line even farther away, about twice the distance that these 2 lines are. So it's going to be about over here, and it's going to be about half the height. So right about there. And you can see it's about half the height. And if you notice, the horizon line here intersects those lines about halfway, give or take, you know, a little bit. And so the next thing that we're going to do is, well, we need to make this one a little bit taller. We want to add a horizontal line from the top of this line to this line. So as best you can, just make a horizontal line like that. And it's okay if that one's a little bit too tall, that's fine. So a horizontal line connecting the top of that to that. And then we want to connect the bottom to that. And this line will not be horizontal. This line will be a little bit slanting down. So kind of like that. Building a little bit of perspective here, but trying to keep it as easy as possible. And then the next thing, we're gonna, where these 2 lines intersect, we're gonna come to the top of this. So about like that. And then we're going to connect the bottom. All right, so now what we want to do, we want to create the roof to our little barn building here. What you want to do is in between these 2 lines, right in the center, just going to make a little mark. So like right in the center between those 2, and we're just going to go up a little bit and make a dot right between those 2 lines. So it's in the center of these 2 lines, and then we're just going to connect that dot to the side. Like that. And we're going to come past it a little bit because the roof is going to have a little bit of an overhang. Now this line here is perfectly horizontal, and we're going to make the roof follow this line. And what we need to imagine is the wall on the other side. I'm going to just make a little mark here. So imagine this is the corner on the other side of the barn. And so what you need is, you need that point in between here and this line. So it's about right there. We're just going to come up, make a little dot. We're going to connect the top of the roof to that dot there. And then of course we're going to come down and intersect that edge and just come past it a little bit. And then let's give our barn a little window, maybe a little window right here. And then of course the door, I'm just going to put in a little door, fill that in with black. Just something simple like that. And maybe, yeah, let's put a little door right here as well. Small door. Maybe this is a door that you just walk in, and that's a door you drive in. All right, so that is the sketch outline of our barn. And what we're gonna do next is add some of the cool gray number 6. Basically just gonna color in the whole barn with the cool gray number 6. So everywhere except for the windows and the doors, we're just going to quickly color in. There we are. And now we are going to take, maybe let's make our barn, I'm going to make my barn a little bit brown. So not the roof, but just the bottom part of the barn. I'm going to use some of the burnt sienna right over top of that cool gray. Just kind of like this. And then I'm going to use some of the cool gray number 1 to add some, a different color for the roof. So I'm going to make the roof a bit lighter. So there's my roof, and then this side of the barn, so since we've established a little bit of the light from the sun hitting the top part of these trees, I'm going to make this side of the barn a bit brighter. So I'm going to just add a little bit of the light cool gray number 1 to give this barn a bit of a highlight. I'm going to use some black to give this part of the barn a little bit of a shadow. And now I'm going to blend that out. I'm going to start with the roof. I'm going to use the blending knife here to create the most consistent color and kind of refine the edges of the roof a little bit. There we go. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the side of the barn here. And then the last side of the barn. Now this side should be darker. So if it doesn't show up as dark as it needs to, I'm just going to add a little bit more black to it. Yeah, it's not quite as dark as I want, so I'm just going to take the black, apply a little bit more black to this side. There we go. Still not quite as the way I want it, so I'm going to add some more of a light gray, cool gray number 1 to the roof here. Try to get rid of those black outlines. And I'll add just a little bit of it here to lighten this side of the barn. Take your time with this. It can be tricky trying to do these details with soft pastels, but all right. Now, one last blend. Perfect. All right. Let's just blend out the window, blend out the door. And then let's add a little bit of a shadow using the black. So I'm just going to use the black right in the grass and just kind of add some black there. Pull that shadow off to the side. All right, and there is our barn. Now the next thing that we're going to do is just finish off the grass, add some detail. All right, so to start the grass texture, I am going to start with black, and I'm just going to put in a bunch of little dashed lines. We've done grass in a few other projects, so hopefully you've gotten pretty good at doing grass by this point. But remember, the rule is that the further away you get from the foreground, the shorter you need to draw your little dashed lines. So just use really, really small dashed lines in the back. And then once you get up closer, you can go a little bit bigger. You can get into a good rhythm. And then you'll be done before you know it. As you get up towards the front, you'll want to make your dashed lines a little bit more dense. So you'll have more up front, they'll be longer, and all of that. All right, now we're going to continue doing that same thing with our olive green. I'm going to use a lot of the olive green here, and I'm going to also add the grass in front of our little barn here. So I'm going to kind of erase the footprint of the barn by adding a bunch of grass in front of it. You don't have to take these grass little dashed lines all the way back to the horizon, because the horizon you won't really see any texture anyway, and just kind of not really worth the time putting in the dashed lines all the way back to that fog, as we're probably going to keep that area nice and soft. And we're going to add some more fog over the grass here. In fact, that will be our next color. Almost done here. A few more blades of grass up in the front with this olive green. And then we're going to do the same thing with the cool gray number 1. Probably a bit more generously than the black and olive color. Make that fog come in really nicely. Alright, so the cool gray number 1. I'm going to do some dashed lines, but I'm also going to do some light horizontal strokes for that fog, because I want that fog to be a little bit heavier. And I'm kind of sketching it in lightly, almost like water. A little bit in front of the barn there, maybe a bit heavier right there, right behind the barn. Make that fog a little bit heavier. Remember to stay as random as you can when you're doing your grass. The more random, the better. I've seen a lot of your projects that everyone's posted on Instagram and Facebook and whatnot. And on all of the grassy projects, one of the things that I've come across a number of times is that there's the length of your grass. Remember, pay very, very close attention to the changing in the length of your grass. Only up here in the front do you want those long blades of grass. Everything back here, you'd almost be safer just doing little dots instead of dashes. But you really want to make sure that you get the change in length for your grass, because that helps a lot kind of building that depth and perspective in the landscape. And notice that the change in length happens very fast. And within half of the paper, you're going from dots to almost 1 inch, 2 centimeter length lines. And for every step you take, the length decreases by half. So if you were to measure with like maybe the length of the pastel stick here, this is going to be the longest, and then for this part it's going to be half the length, and then for this part it's going to be half that length, and so forth. That's you want to keep that stuff in mind. All right, that looks pretty good for the grass, so let's go ahead and just blend this out. I'm going to just gently blend it out with little vertical strokes of the blender here to keep that grass-like texture alive. There we go. And then for the foggier parts, I'm just going to kind of sweep across. This is going to kind of make the grass feel blurry, which I think fog does quite well. So just kind of add a little bit of motion blur to the grass to make that foggy feel. There we go. And let's see here. I'm going to add a little bit of gravel before we move on to anything else. So I'm just going to take my craft knife. I'm going to take the cool gray number 6, and I'm just going to scrape off a little bit of gravel here. And as I get further away, I'm going to do less of the texture. So I'm going to maintain my gravel texture mostly just up in the front here. A little bit of that cool gray. I'm going to do some burnt sienna. of brown gravel, dirt, I guess would be a better way of describing it. And let's do some highlights using the cool gray number 1. There we go, a little bit of gravel. I'm just going to use my finger to tap that in instead of grabbing a piece of glassine paper. So I'm just going to tap it in because the gravel is a little bit messier. So I'm just going to tap it in with my finger real quickly. And there we go. So the last thing I want to do is I'm going to add a nice little tree right in here to finish off this project. So to start my tree, I'm just going to grab my black. I'm gonna put the tree in like right here, and that's going to come up, kind of be a wiggly line. It's going to come all the way up to here. I have another branch coming over here. Make it a little bit thicker as I get down to the bottom. That, and let's put a branch coming off here and another one maybe coming up right here, and let's see, let's have one coming up in here as well, and one kind of reaching out this way. And let's put a few little twigs coming off. For the twigs, just press real lightly. That's how you get those thinner lines. Do a little sweeping motion. Doesn't have to be too many twigs because we're going to cover up a lot of this tree with some leaves. But before we move on, let's use our burnt sienna to give this tree just a little bit more color before we add anything else. So I'm going to just add some of the burnt sienna on the left side of the tree trunk a little bit. No need to really do any of the branches too much. You can add a little bit, but it's not totally important. And then I'm going to add some cool gray number 1 for highlights. Just highlight that left edge of the tree. There we go. And before we add any leaves, I'm just going to blend this out. I'm going to take some black to just give it a highlight down in the grass, just slightly. Just kind of sweeping highlight over, just like that. You know what, I almost kind of like it being a bare tree like that, so maybe I won't add too many leaves. Let's grab our olive green. Actually, let's grab black first. Just put in few leaves. I'm going to say that it's fall, and this tree is struggling to hold on to its final leaves. Maybe even have a leaf kind of falling down, a couple of them. Maybe this little bunch here is about all it's got. Can't really hold on to any others. Now, on top of the black, we're going to add the olive green. Right on top of the black, a few little heavy dots with the olive green. I did intend on making this just a full tree, but I kind of like the idea of it, you know, weathered down a tiny bit. Let's add a very, very small amount of tangerine. Now this is going to be super bright on top of these darker colors, but we're going to mix these colors together, so little touch of tangerine won't hurt anything. Going to make those leaves brighten up just a tiny bit. And yeah, I think that's good. Let's go ahead, I'm going to just grab the blender. I'm just going to kind of tap those leaves until I kind of soften the intensity of that tangerine color so it's not so crazy bright. I want it to show up, but I don't want it to be overwhelming. So just give it a little bit of a tap. All right, I think that is going to be it. Now, of course, it is time for the untaping, everybody's favorite part. And here we are, everyone, our finished painting. I hope you enjoyed this project, and I look forward to seeing your pastel painting. So be sure to tag it with hashtag Peaceful Pastels when you share it on social media. Thank you again for watching. Make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss future content. Give the video a thumbs up and have a wonderful day. And I'll see you next time. Take care. Peace.